Today I thought I would talk about mystery, about mysterious things, about invisible support, about some of the help I've had from beyond the grave. I remember talking to John Anderson. John Anderson was my main teacher on the door, Awesome Anderson. If you want to read about him, he's in Watch My Back. And he said to me, he was doing a bit of teaching with me at my masterclass, and he said, don't forget to tell people stories. People need stories. I tell my stories so often that I think people must be bored of them. But John said, you must remember to tell the stories because they're really important. So I thought I'd tell this story about a guy called Danny Connor. And this was when I first brought out my book, Watch My Back. And I used a picture on the front of me with a knuckle duster. Very strong image, and it took me all day to get this image. We did thousands of pictures, and it's this very strong image, and the idea of the image was really just a neon light. It was just something to draw people into the book, because the book essentially was about the futility of violence. It was obviously a very violent book, and it talked about violence in its book about superficially it's a book about a Coventry bouncer, but actually it's not really. It's about a conflicted, divided man. It's about a man that's living under the dominion of fear. So he's leaning into fear. He's afraid of fear, so he's going out and he's looking into fear, leaning into fear, marinating in fear to try and overcome and get desensitized to fear. So it's a book about a universal issue, which is fear. Fear is what keeps most people small. So I did this book called Watch My Back, and it had a great impact. Actually, it's gone all over the world now. It's all the films I do and everything else comes from this one book. My whole life comes from this one book, and it's a book about essence, which I'll talk about on another podcast. But it's a book about getting to the very source of things. So we use this image on the front of the book about a knuckle duster. There's lots of stories in the book about knuckle dusters and violence, and it's a very beautiful, very honest book. And at the time I put this out, I was kind of a second hand in the martial arts. I was just a club player really, but I'd been a nightclub doorman in search of this in search of the secret to fearlessness. So I became a nightclub doorman to overcome my fears, and I wrote about it. I wrote about martial arts, about how martial arts fitted and didn't fit into that world, about how you had to adapt to that world, and about the fact that everybody feels fear. Even the titans I worked with were afraid. Everybody was afraid. Some people just hit it better than others. So I did this book called Watch My Back. I put it out there, and it introduced me to Peter Considine, who did an interview with me for Martial Arts Illustrated, and the interview introduced me to the martial arts world in general. Me and Peter later became partners in the British Combat Association. Peter introduced me to Danny Connor. Danny Connor was a very senior martial artist, very erudite, very articulate man who'd kind of travelled around the world and trained with some amazing people. He was a man to admire. So I spoke to Danny a couple of times on the phone, and I was really taken with him because he was very funny and fiercely sharp, fiercely intelligent. He was I was kind of quoting Bruce Lee, he was quoting Rumi or Musashi. He was way ahead of me. He was so I really liked him. I looked up to him. He's an older guy than me, probably about the next generation. So I really liked him. I really admired him. So the book came out. Me and Peter started our own association. And then letters started to appear in the magazines, specifically Martial Arts Illustrated, from Danny attacking me, and I was really shocked by it. I was really surprised because I spoke to Danny on the phone, and we'd had some conversations, and I think personally I thought this is going to be a guy that can mentor me. This is someone that will help me like Peter did. Peter's been a great mentor for me. He really helped me. So I was kind of disappointed and also a bit shocked. I was a big guy. I could have a fight. I got a big ego, and suddenly there's this guy in the magazine not just criticising me, but really slagging me off to the point where he actually called me a cockroach. Now Danny Connor was Peter's first instructor, So I was very angry about these letters and confused, and Peter rang me up and said, look, you know, Danny's my instructor, and he's a bit upset because we're doing our own association together, so please don't do nothing, please don't react to it. So I was left with this guy that continually wrote in the magazines, continually insulted me, continually attacked me, and I couldn't respond because I got so much respect for Peter that he said to me, please don't respond, don't get embroiled in it, it'll just go away, just let it go. And he said, Danny's really a good guy, he's a good man, but he's taken a dislike to you for his own reasons. So Peter asked me not to respond, so I said I wouldn't respond, but I'm still left with all this anger and all this confusion, and what do you do with that? So the point of this podcast is we're talking about forgiveness, what Danny Connor taught me, and I'll talk to you more about the mystery that came later, which was amazing, but he taught me about forgiveness because I couldn't really respond to Danny, because I'd vowed to Peter that I wouldn't, and because I had no outlet for this anger, and because people were saying, what are you going to do about Danny Connor, and Danny Connor's done this and Danny Connor said that, and what are you going to do about that? I couldn't really do nothing other than take it. So I used to walk every morning around Coombe Abbey and got this anger raising up in me and thinking, what am I going to do about this? So I did a bit of research on Danny, and I found out more things about him. I researched his life, and I spoke to some people that knew him, and I realised what a great man he was, and that what a pioneer he was. And he was doing kind of Chinese soft arts when everybody was still punching bags and kicking things and breaking stuff. And he was writing books about the Chinese system and about Chinese medicine, about Qigong and about Xingyi and about all of the kind of internal arts. So he was kind of way ahead of his game. He'd been to China and Japan and trained as an Occidental, again, years and years before anybody else had that idea. He'd written books about the martial arts. He ran a shop in Manchester selling martial arts gear. He was fiercely intelligent, and he was a very, very capable martial artist. So I suddenly started finding out all these things about Danny Connor that I really liked, and I just kept feeling this warmness with him. I kept feeling this warmth, and I thought, this guy is, you know, he's massively intelligent and he's massively able, and he's taken a dislike to me, but he wasn't on his own there. There was a lot of people that took a dislike to me because I was talking about the truth, and people are often offended by the truth, and the truth is, this is the essence, this is what works, and this is what violence is like. And obviously a big part of martial arts is the martial aspect, which is preparing people for war, which involves acts of great violence. So I was just looking at that and seeing what was working and what wasn't working, and I wrote about it, and people didn't mind talking about kata, and they didn't mind talking about single and double stamps, and you know, which is in your kata, which we teach our 5-year-olds. They didn't mind talking about knife hand strikes to the throat. They didn't mind talking about strangulation, which was in the kata. They didn't mind talking about, you know, the bludgeoning blows that you can create through a strong karate strike, but they didn't like talking about you know, actually seeing that work for real in a real situation, and the consequences of that. There's, you know, a lot of martial artists somehow separated, they created a romance around their martial arts and separated the hideous violence. People criticise me quite a lot for some of the stuff I did, but I said, well, it's in your katas. The stuff I do on the door is in your katas. You teach it to children, you know, you put it out there and make it look good and win medals with it, but that's what it is. So Danny was offended by what I did, and I was never quite sure why that was, but it didn't really matter. But the fact was that I was left with a lot of anger, which was because I had a big ego, and because I couldn't find a direct outlet for that, I had to look for another source of relief, and the source of relief was I found a lot of things I liked about him, and the things I liked about him completely outweighed the one thing I didn't like about him. And I was suddenly found myself liking Danny Connor. I suddenly found myself actually loving Danny Connor. And then one of my students said to me one day, fucking hell, Danny Connor's called you a cockroach in the magazine, what are you going to do? And I remember smiling and just saying, I'm going to forgive him. And my student goes, oh, and that was it. We never spoke about it again. And then everybody else would say to me, what are you going to do about Danny Connor? I said, I'm going to forgive Danny Connor, because I'd learned forgiveness from him. That's what he taught me. It was inadvertent, but what he taught me. And things happened after that. I tried to correspond with Danny because he got very ill, unfortunately, and I tried to correspond with him, but he was still very angry at me, so we never did correspond before he died. I actually wrote to him and said, listen, I really admire you. I really like you. I would love to come and meet you and have a cup of tea. And he got really angry and sent another nasty letter off to the magazines, which they wouldn't print because it was too nasty. So I never really got to speak to Danny before he died. But I know Peter loved him, and because Peter loved him, I was able to find love for him as well. Peter idolised. I hope Peter doesn't mind me saying that, but he loved Danny, and he still does now. So I learnt forgiveness from Danny Connor. That's the first part. The second part, the mystery, is after Danny died. I remember when he died, because Danny thought I was a thug, and I was violent, and maybe I was. I was certainly lost. Maybe I was a lot of things that he pointed out. But after he died, I remember thinking to myself, from talking to him in my mind and saying, listen, you know now that I'm not what you think I am. I'm just trying to find the right path, and this is the route I've taken. Anyway, after that, I was about a year after Danny died. I was approached. I was doing some teaching for Bob Sarks in Huddersfield, and I was approached by this very enigmatic, very charming man called Lance Lewis. He approached me and just said, I'm one of Danny's students. I just have this feeling that I've got to do something for you. And I just really loved him, and I know he is absolutely, unequivocally one of the best martial artists in the world, and I was really flattered. So Lance came into my life and he started teaching me some Qigong, and he came into my life at a point where I was going through massive changes, a massive catharsis. I was actually dying. I went through a stage of the old Geoff dying, and the pain of that, the turmoil of that, to the point where I was literally on my knees and had to go through lots of conventional and unconventional healing, and part of that was Lance Lewis coming into my life and helping to guide me. But at one point I found myself in a room with two Christian healers, because my body was part of this healing, and part of this death and rebirth was a lot of pain in my body, lots of blocks. And so I went to see these two Christian healers. Now, these healers didn't know me. They were a friend of a friend, so they didn't know my background. They didn't know anything. They didn't know Danny. They didn't know anything to do with the martial arts stuff. They just were people that were helping me to heal. So I go to see these healers, and this is one of the many things I did. And when I was in the room with these two beautiful people, they were very lovely people, and they started to do this healing on me. The guy suddenly stopped and said, I have a man in the room, I have a spirit in the room. This is verbatim. I have a spirit in the room who wants to help you. He's wearing a white martial arts suit, and he's from the Oriental world. And I was trying to think, did I know anybody Chinese or Japanese or from the East? And I just said, I don't know anybody from the East. But I said, they're welcome. I don't know who they are, but they're welcome. He said, he's insisting that he wants to help you. And I said, that's really kind. I said, but I can't identify him. I don't know who it is. Anyway, as we went through the healing, I could feel myself resisting. I could feel this big surge of terror. I mean, terror coming up my body and me resisting it. And this guy kept stopping the healing and looking at me, and he was, and then suddenly he found a path, and he was able to bring this energy through me. And after he finished, he just said, oh, that guy that was here at the beginning, he came back again, and he said, I was, I'm just saying what his words were, because I didn't think Danny Connor was a bastard, but he said, I was a bastard to Geoff when he was alive, and now I want to help him. And the guy said to me, his name's Danny. and he's from the Oriental world. He's wearing a white suit. And then of course it clicked, Danny. And I got a book at home with Danny on, a martial arts book that he did on Qigong, with him in a white suit. And Danny ran a shop in Manchester, a martial arts shop called the Oriental World. So Danny Connor came to me after he died to serve me and to help me and to guide me. And what makes that even more mysterious is that I'm going through a similar catharsis now, less so, more, just some more of the residual that I'm clearing. Some of the old pilot light still needs to be cleared. And last night I had a dream of Danny Connor again, and it was very vivid, and he came to me again in the dream and very subtly showed me where I was holding on to things. And I've been holding on to these things for as long as I can remember, but I was never consciously aware. And I don't need to go into what I was holding on to because it's not really relevant, only that he showed me very clearly what I was holding on to, and because he showed me what I was holding on to, I'm able now to let go of it. So that's why I'm talking about Danny Connor today, and about mysterious things, about the fact that he came to me in a healing with a spiritual Christian healer. Actually, and you know, it was actually his name and his character, and has been helping me heal ever since he died. So he taught me, unconsciously he taught me things in his life, and then after he died he's been teaching me again since. So I consider him a teacher. I feel a bit reluctant saying that, but he is. He's showing me very profound things, and I'm very grateful to him. So this is just my way of saying thank you to Danny Connor for helping me heal the first time around, and for helping me heal now, for serving me in life, and for now serving me in death. I'm really grateful to you, Danny. And interestingly, Lance Lewis has just introduced me to Danny Connor's son, Alex, who is a Qigong instructor, and I'm interested in Qigong. So I'm going to meet him and have a cup of tea and see where that goes. So I just thought it was really interesting. And this only happens when I voluntarily ask. Last night I did a meditation on death. I enacted my own death, how that would feel for me, how that would feel for Sharon, how that would feel for my children, how it would feel for me to pass from this mortal coil. Because obviously all our fears lead back one way or another to death. So I meditate on death, I practice looking at my own death, and I asked for some signs, and nothing came in the meditation. But then afterwards, when I went to bed, I had this very vivid dream of me and Danny Connor. First dream I've ever had with him. And like I said, I never ever actually physically met him in the real world, only spoke to him on the phone. But because I've asked for guidance, the guidance has come. So sometimes it's good if you go into your meditation just to say in your meditation, one of the things Muhammad said, show me things as they are, or show me what I'm holding on to, or who am I, or show me what it is that I fear, show me what it is that, you know, show me what my path is. You can ask direct questions, and as long as you're really clear that you want the answers will definitely come if you're ready to hear them. And most people ask the question, but they don't want to hear the answer. So you can get help in life, you can get help from beyond the grave. I once asked Gandhi for help. I said to him, how can I improve? And he said, make yourself small. And in making myself smaller physically, getting rid of my addictions, getting rid of my false beliefs, trimming down my core beliefs, expanding them so that I could see my potential. I was able to, when I contracted my negativities, my conscious net expanded out. So I thought I'd share that story because it's a story I sometimes tell to people, but I've never told it publicly. So it's my way of acknowledging and showing gratitude to Danny Connor.